Well, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, your moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. We have, I hope is going to be a great conversation today, and we've got some really, really smart people, and hoping that we'll get some great information. But before we do get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded. So if you miss any or all of the event, you will be able to access it on demand. We'll be sending out a link in an email after today's webinar that will take you to the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during today's presentation you have a question, please don't wait, don't hesitate, just use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your questions. And hopefully we'll have a few minutes near the end of today's presentation and go through those questions. And then finally, at the end of today's webinar, we are going to be doing a drawing for three, $50 Amazon gift cards. So stick around, hopefully you'll be one of our big winners. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and
Charlene, we're already big winners because we're here. We're on this wonderful webinar.
We've already won. Off yet. All right. So let's get started with today's webinar. We can. They're chomping at the bit to get going. So today's webinar is database tools worth knowing, or DevOps tools, database tools worth knowing. Sorry about that. Our speakers today, if I can find my slide deck here. Hold on a minute, guys. Let's see.
Who the hell are these people?
I don't know. Who are you? What are you doing on my computer?
Oh, my goodness. Look at that.
Our speaker today is Brady Bird, who is a Senior Solutions Architect at DB Maestro, and Robert Reeves, who is the CTO and co-founder at Datacle. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me today. I can tell already we're going to have a really fascinating conversation. Brady, why don't we start with you? Just tell us a little bit about yourself, tell us about your company, and then we'll hand it over to Robert.
Certainly. Thanks, Charlene. So I've been with DB Maestro for about 2.5 years now. I came from a whole application release automation background, developed a tool that got acquired by BMC, and that's kind of where I met Rob when he was in the same boat. and then, I always said that if I was going to, go off and start another company, it would be aimed at database deployment automation. And so I jumped in with DB Maestro a couple of years ago and been very happy with the choice.
All right, great, Robert.
Well, I'm Robert Reeves. I'm a CTO over at Datacle. I am a recovering release manager. We used to call that software configuration management. And that was a fancy word for cleaning up developers' throw up. Much like a janitor at an elementary school, I'd walk around with sawdust to get the software out the door. And because it was such a terrible job, thankless, I started a company called Furnace. BMC bought them, so Brady was talking about, and realized that, with DevOps, cloud, agility, containers, we are accelerating and providing all sorts of good stuff for our application developers, the dev side of DevOps. We're not doing much for our DBAs. We're not doing much for the data tier. And that's a shame. That's a missed opportunity. And so that's what Datacle's purpose is, to align the pace at which we can get the application out, the application code, with our database code. And that's what Datacle does.
Awesome. All right, great. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for joining me today. I think we're going to have a very spirited conversation here. So moving rapidly along, maybe, if my computer wants to work for me. There we go. Okay, so today's webinar is one of a few in a series that focus on DevOps tools. We just, about a month ago, maybe not even a month ago, put out the State of DevOps Tools 2019 book, which is basically a listing of some of the tools that you need to know if you're in the DevOps space. kind of a catalog of sorts. It's now going to be, it is available now for download on devops.com. Everybody who registered for today's webinar is going to be receiving a link to download it as well. So if you can't find it on the devops.com site, check in your email. What we'd like to do then is really focus more on the technology than the actual tools themselves, though, because it's one thing to have the conversation about about the tools and say it does this, it does that, but you kind of walk away kind of with little, if any, useful information for you. So we're kind of hoping to dig a little bit deeper in our conversation today and really talk about, as I said, the technology and really what it means to the DevOps space in general. So I'd like to kick off today's webinar with the first question, which is, why should we care when we're talking about database for DevOps? Because if you think about it, it's like I can hear about database for DevOps, or I could just roll over and go back to sleep. So Robert, why don't you kick us off? Why should folks care?
Well, I mean, look, the number one way we evaluate how effective we are as software developers, and make no mistake, that's what we all are. All right, I don't care what your company does. You are a software company, or you're going the way of Sears. That's it. And how we evaluate how well we're doing as a software company is lead time. It's one of the 4 metrics that DevOps Research and Assessment, Dr. Forsgren and her team pay attention to. The amount of time from code check-in until it's out in production. Well, guess what, folks? You got to update the database. All right, if you are pushing out an application code change, you could either manually update that database, go into sort of a wait state, file an anti-pattern ticket to get stuff done, or you can automate it. Companies are choosing to do that. They're realizing that as they automate the application side of the app, the compiled bits, they are still not seeing the full value of DevOps. It's a shame, but that's what DevOps teaches us. Fix one problem, identify the biggest blocker to getting software out the door, to shortening that lead time, and then go look at the next one and the next one. I believe that we are moving to a point where it is no longer dev and some ops. It is now true DevOps, as we include the database in our DevOps conversations, our tool evaluation, our implementation at our companies. And that's an exciting time because we're finally getting to full stack, lights out. I don't even have to talk to anyone to get this pushed out to production. And that's why you should care.
Brady, what do you think? What are, is there anything that Robert didn't talk about there that you think is worthwhile for the audience to know about when we talk about whether or why you should care about database for DevOps?
Well, I think Rob laid out the problem very well there, and in fact, that's what I just like to add a little bit to it to say, for one thing, there's been some very notable failures in this space. And I have caveat, I did some research to try and see if I was right on this, and I couldn't find the full depth on it. But the story I heard was, I remember a couple of years ago, United sold plane tickets for $0 and just charged the taxes. Yeah. That the ultimate source of that was that the pricing codes for the airline flights were not correctly loaded into the database when they went live. And what happened, the math had good error trapping in it, so it all came back with 0 when it couldn't look up the code. And that's why people got free plane tickets. So not updating your database in an automated way can cost real money.
Yeah, yeah.
And the
absolutely.
other side of it is that the tool offering to date, really hasn't addressed this. There's been this belief that the way we deploy your compiled application bits is perfectly adequate for the way we deploy database. And as we'll see, that doesn't necessarily play out.
All right, great. Yeah, I remember the United incident, and I thought, God, why can't I be that lucky? But I know United obviously was not feeling that way at that
Yeah.
point. So, yeah, it's really interesting because it really shows that that you've got to make sure that every piece of your system is working in tandem to make sure that everything works correctly as it should be. So let's go ahead and move on. And I want to take a look real quick about, take a look at the state of the market, see what's happening within the market. That's maybe some things that you guys have seen as far as some trends that are happening, some of the maybe the way that the space in general is kind of shifting, and then I would love to hear if you guys have any anecdotal information on who you guys think is really doing it right in this space, who's doing it well, and why are they doing it well. So again, Robert, let's go ahead and start with you, and I'd love to kind of get your kind of feelings on the space in general right now, and then tell me who's doing it well.
Well, what excuse me, what really jumped out at me at DevOps Enterprise Summit, the last one, was Courtney Kistler and Ann Bradley did a presentation. It was one of the kickoff, let's call it the keynote. And it was really interesting because Courtney is, VP of Digital, all right? That's her job. Ann is Chief Privacy Officer, okay? So what the hell was Ann doing up there outside of being awesome? Ann is great. She's hardcore privacy advocate online. I love her to death, and she's got my back. And so the conversation that they were having up there was about Courtney wanted to kill an application. She wanted to kill it. She's kind of messing with it. And every time she tried to make a business case to get rid of it, it's costing too much to take care of. It really doesn't fit our needs, blah, blah, blah. There's always somebody in the back of the room would say, well, what about this? I really like that app, and kept it around. Well, Courtney reached out to Ann, and with GDPR and they knew that this application was violating that, they said, Ann, I need some help. So what is our fine exposure here? And basically it was going to be about $1 billion. A billion, a B. The big, not million, billion, okay? And she said, well, okay, but what are the chances of us actually getting fined? She said, about 50-50. So the expected value of that was $500,000. They took that to management and they said, yeah, it's going to cost us $500 million, $500 million to keep this application going. All of a sudden it died. All of a sudden they took it out behind the woodshed. And they did the old, I'm going to miss you. It just took them out. And it went away. And so the trend here that I'm seeing is people that are not technical, more business-oriented folks are getting involved in these decisions, as is right. Mm-hmm. And I think that is, one of the reasons why I would say that Nike is doing it well. Nike is certainly under a lot of pressure from small regional online retailers to they want to sell more on Nike.com and less through who's going to Foot Locker anymore, right? And so what they're working really hard on is these systems of engagement, mobile, multi-channel, several apps. Heck, I got one on my phone here for my self-lacing Nike Adapts. All right. And so I'm just going to tighten my laces here. Bam. All right. Bluetooth, tighten my laces. This is what Nike is very good at. They realize their strengths is in making shoes, supply chain, those consumer apps, things that they're not good at, DevOps tools. And so they're reaching out to a lot of folks and saying, hey, help us out with this. They're not afraid of realizing their core strengths. And so that's the trend, investing or inviting people that are non-technical to the table to help make the case for DevOps and for making good tech decisions. But also, they realize that they can't do it alone. And that's really cool. I think that shows a lot of courage. And certainly for Courtney and Ann to talk about that on stage, that's a strong move. That's an alpha dog move, and that's great.
Yeah, it's really interesting you bring up the GDPR, and I'm sure we'll be talking about this a little bit more when we talk about, why now. But I don't think that a lot of folks are considering things such as the implications of compliance when it comes to DevOps for the database, because there can be some real privacy issues attached to that now with all of these regulations, GDPR, and then the California compliance out there, CCA, I think it is, and some others that are coming out. That's definitely going to be a major consideration for a lot of companies. So thanks for bringing that up. That's a really good one. Brady, what are you kind of seeing in the sector itself, and maybe some of the trends that you're seeing? And then, do you have any examples of any companies or organizations that you think are doing it well?
Well, yeah, I'd like to take it a little closer to home here, which is to say that, we, over the last couple of years, the types of customers who come to us and are looking for tools and this and that, what we've seen is a definite shift in the groups that are formed in companies to go out and purchase a product in this realm. And so, typically we would, a couple of years back, it was exclusively like teams of DBAs or something would come to us, or maybe it would be a sort of release management head of DevOps type person who's trying to run down what tools they want to have in their portfolio. But what I've seen more often, and customers that are able to really arrive at a decision and evaluate things effectively, are where they're actually coming to us with a full multidisciplinary team right off the bat. It's always a difficult conversation when someone comes in and we say, "I'm sorry, but you guys might be excited, but you don't have the right people in the room. You're going to buy this," and someone else is going to say, "Nobody asked me."
Right.
So it's this thing of and that really is DevOps penetration into the marketplace, that people are not having to be told by a vendor, "I don't think you have the right people in the room." People have already gone through those DevOps principles, and they're coming at the problem saying, unless I have my head of compliance, unless I have my head of development in the room, this is a non-starter, because we're buying a tool that's going to affect everyone. And so I think that's a really important thing. And we've seen a lot of this in financial services sector, where things tended, 10 years ago, it was super siloed, everything about it. But we're really seeing a lot more of these multidisciplinary teams coming at it. And then they're now making this, the sort of product and tool decisions. And it's great to see how the different drivers, whoever is the visionary that put the team together. A lot of time, I did a talk a few months ago on, one day I went to work and I was on a DevOps team. Because that's what happens, these big organizations, somebody says, I'm looking at percentages, but you've got 60% of your time this year and you're going to be on a DevOps team. And all of a sudden, this is my life, right? And now I've got to figure out what DevOps is and how I approach it and all of that. But kudos to the management in that thing, because these people are being drawn in and they're suddenly seeing all those perspectives. And so, the DBAs make their case. It's not a bad case. It's a very real case on safety and understanding, what the impacts of things could be. And then, they hear from the release people that says, well, developers do that stuff all the time because they have to be structured about where they store their files. So you're not asking anything big of them. So don't worry, it'll be okay. And it's this. And so, that's what I would say is that the sort of who's doing it well is the folks that are really who understand that it's a multidisciplinary problem. For even though databases are very specialized, they're very like, what do you call it? I don't know if you've ever been on a fishing trip where your hip waiter is filled up once and you have to get back in those cold, wet rubber hip waders. And so
not a situation I've ever been in, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. But I think the realm of it, the experience is there. So and so people jumping into the database space, they might feel uncomfortable. They might feel like it's going to get too technical. But what we're seeing more and more in the marketplace is they're putting together those teams and they're getting better results because of it.
Yeah, well, that makes a whole lot of sense too. Definitely. So, yeah, because, to your point, people are bringing in different perspectives, and I think that's totally necessary in any DevOps implementation and really any project in general. You can't just move forward without getting that, sometimes it's the dreaded input from all the different departments, but I think it's valuable. And it definitely brings a new perspective to a lot of companies or IT teams that maybe are kind of singular in their vision. So definitely a good trend.
Yeah, Vanguard's had a lot of success with that. And Jeff Dowd's the CIO over there, and when he's always at AWS conferences talking about cloud. But I think it's applicable here, and it's certainly the term that he uses. I really like. He talks about bringing all the typical cloud antibodies into to the table. Security, certainly procurement, going from a capex to opex. Monthly expense versus a one-time expense. This is hard. And I think that there are a lot of DevOps antibodies out there. Now, whether it's because they're concerned about their job or they're concerned about just things being different, maybe they've been sold tech before in the past that hasn't worked out. I know there's a lot of DBAs out there that have a problem with ORM, rightfully so, and they might view DevOps through the database through that lens. But having them at the table, Brady, you're right. It's absolutely imperative to bring them in, and the sooner you do it, the more successful you will be.
All right, great. So let's go ahead and move on to our next topic here, which is just kind of, if you will, kind of setting the stage for why we're talking about database DevOps for databases. It seems like, at least from my perspective, a lot of the conversations that were happening around databases and DevOps were kind of in the category of nothing for a long time, and it was kind of like the forgotten child, if you will. So I'm kind of curious to you guys. I'm throwing it out to you. Why do you think that, as I say on the slide, why was there no love for the database when it came to DevOps?
I think you'd have to say it was a questionable return on investment was the way it was, and I think the problem is more quantified now. But what would happen is people, and frankly, I wrote an ARA tool, and we completely soft sold what you could do to the database in that product, and the
you were digging your own grave there.
There was a sense of, okay, databases are really complicated and messy, and we could invest a ton of time in this, and I don't know that people would be any more attracted to buy our ARA product because of it. Because right now, they're drowning in the over-the-wall problem when the build gets made, and they want to, and they need to address that. And like Rob said in the beginning, until they got through those hurdles, database wasn't showing up as the big limiter. And I think right now people are saying, oh, right. I was working with a financial utility processor. They had a 6.5 hour deployment time. Through ARA automation, we optimized literally 90% gains in the deployment time. That got the deployment time down to 5 hours because the rest was database modifications.
Good Lord.
It's, you can say we've made huge steps, but if you can't address that part, so. But like I said, it's a tough problem to get into. There's a whole statefulness. There's the high consequence side of databases. Sure, you deployed your app wrong. Oh, rip it out and redeploy it. Big deal. You deployed your database wrong. You might have to restore a terabyte. And it's this thing of, people don't have the appetite for that. And so I think it was, whatever you want to call it, it was fear factor. It was diminishing returns. But now, the problem is more exposed because automation has been introduced. And this is the part that's left out.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Robert, what are your thoughts?
Well, it certainly made it really clear. You're right. If it takes, 6 hours to deploy an app, you automate the app side, but leave the database, and you're left with 5 hours. Made it very clear that is the real bottleneck. Prior to that, though, they really didn't know, and it's much like a solar eclipse. The moon goes in front of the sun, and you just see a disk of light, and you say, oh, well, that's what the sun looks like. And so you get past the moon, and then you realize that there's this really big ball of hydrogen there that is much larger, much more dangerous than the moon. And it's a real, oh crap moment. It really is. But that's okay. That's what DevOps helps us do. Let's identify the bottlenecks here as we know them. And then resolve them. Now, in all fairness, though, a lot of this has been caused by how DBAs have been siloed. We, as an industry, have done them a disservice by keeping them off on an island. We thought that by restricting access to them and making it very hard to get things through the DBA team, it was a good thing. Turns out it did not make us any safer. It was, theater. Okay, we're going to go through a ticket, and this is going to be great. When in reality, there's that saying, ships are safer in a harbor, but that's not what ships are made for.
Right.
And if you accelerate your application delivery, you are going to crush the DBA team until you get to full automation. I certainly have seen emails from DBAs saying, oh, thank God we're using this stuff, because I was getting crushed. They're missing piano recitals, they're missing date nights, they're missing, happy hours, all the fun stuff that they want to do. Meanwhile, their developer brethren are, going to KubeCon and learning about Kubernetes and wearing skinny jeans and having Macs. For them, it's great. DevOps is wonderful, but for the DBAs, we've done them a disservice. And I think it comes down to that siloed approach that companies previously wanted to have a little bit of contention between development and operations. Development's charged with changing things. Well, we know change is the enemy to stability. Operations like stability. So let's have them duke it out, and we'll have the best idea. When in reality, we just have a regression to the mean. Instead, we need to break down those walls, because that's what got us into this mess and eliminated us looking at the database. There was certainly not a willingness from customers, from companies to say, hey, we need to take care of this today. Now they know. Why not? Probably because, one, like Brady said, was the juice worth the squeeze? And two, it's been siloed, but DevOps is breaking those silos down.
So, judging from your comments and Brady's comments, it sounds like database, obviously we all see the importance of having DevOps attached to databases, but it almost sounds like DevOps has come to the database kicking and screaming. Do you guys agree, or is it, are people like seeing the love, or is it more like, we've got to do this, so let's just, get down and do it?
Well, nobody's going out of their way to change. All right. This is, you kill the alligators that are closest to the boat, right? Why worry about one that's a mile away when you got one right here that's about to eat you? Mm-hmm. And so I think it's not so much about kicking and screaming, though. I think now database professionals are saying, hey, I want in. I'm seeing all this cool stuff. And frankly, they're tired of being DBAs. They want to, make that progression to a site reliability engineer. One, it's a cooler job.
Right.
You get to play with other things. And two, it pays better. Mm-hmm. That's dope.
Yeah.
So we've certainly seen, the book Database Reliability Engineering has come out. We're also starting to see DBAs that are now freed up from application releases are able to make that shift. They're able to take all that wonderful knowledge trapped between their ears and bring it to the product teams. We're no longer doing development teams. We're doing product teams. And that's good. I see it increasing quality of life, but, it's going to be difficult because it is different. And some people are concerned about that, and there is kicking and screaming from them. But, after a while, they get it real quick, and they very much appreciate it. That's at least what I've seen from my perspective.
Brady, what about you? What are you seeing?
My sense of DBAs, and at the risk of a gross generalization, right? It's that we've got a group of people, and as a body of workers, it's a mature body of workers, right? A lot of DBAs got established, some time ago, and basically what's happened, as Rob said, we've accelerated this whole release process. And what used to be, somebody who could spend time, doing query analysis and optimization of execution plans and things like that, and looking at logs and understanding storage capacity and things like that. Mm-hmm. They're script jockeys now. Somebody hands them a bunch of scripts. They read the scripts. They're like, oh my God, they didn't do the storage parameters on the table. How am I going to tolerate it? And they're doing all this stuff, and then they're running the scripts, and then the script's broken. They're like, well, what did you really mean when you did that? Okay, well, now I got to fix this. And what we're doing on the other hand is we're handing them their capacity to do what they're originally charged with doing, which is, the safety and integrity of the platform. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. They were sucked into this whole running scripts thing because everybody said, well, okay, who do I want to be responsible if it breaks?
Right.
The DBA.
Right. That
guy. It's like having a mechanic. It's like only having a mechanic drive your car. It just makes no sense.
Right.
Yeah, mechanics are important when things go wrong, or certainly preventive maintenance. But because they know, the proper compression ratios on an engine. I don't know. Is that even a term? I don't know. I'm throwing something out. But because they know how to check the compression on a cylinder, they're the only ones that can drive the car, and that's just stupid. Mm-hmm. That's dumb. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, yeah, we can do better. We can do better.
Well, yeah, Robert, you mentioned in an offline conversation, and actually you guys did a previous webinar on it. In the last door report, you were talking about the fact that they looked at the database in DevOps, and they found some really interesting results. And I'm hoping that you can kind of refresh my memory on what they did find.
Well, Dr. Nicole Forsgren is wise and prescient.
Okay.
And what she did was she started asking questions the last State of DevOps report. And I encourage everybody to go check it out. Go make sure and look at the one from Dora, not the other one, okay? And so this is the one with the good data. And so what she found is that, there are 4 buckets of IT performers: low, medium, high, and this year they added an elite, because the rich keep getting richer. You adopt DevOps, you get better and better and better. It never slows down. You just continue to improve. It's amazing. But she found that, one, by including the database, including the data tier in your DevOps implementation, you are going to outperform your peers. Okay, cool. All right. But what was really interesting about that, and she used a statistics term that I had to have her explain to me like 27 times, that this concept, this idea of the database in DevOps is not differentiated across performers. And what that means is that regardless of whether you are low, medium, high, or elite, you can still benefit. So, Brady and I were talking about, we wanted to automate the app first, then we'll do the database. When in reality, you should be doing them at the same time. It's the entire app. And that's what her research proved out. And so, obviously, we're vendors. We have database tools. But don't believe us, believe Dr. Forsgren, that this is something that the time has come. And there are enough people in the data set that have done it and have reaped benefits from it. And it doesn't matter where you are. It's not one of those things where like, I'll do it later. No, you kind of need to do it now. Actually, like last year, but might as well do it now.
No time like the present. Well, speaking
exactly.
of tools, yes, you guys are vendors, but we are constantly having this kind of conversation around pretty much any of the tools that that we talk about in DevOps, and that is kind of that the debate between whether open source is better than proprietary, which one is better. And one of the things that I have thought about with databases and DevOps is the fact that I think a lot of companies have kind of approached it from a more kind of homegrown manner, and they've created these monsters of systems or solutions, the in-house solutions that are pretty much good for them, but maybe not so good for other companies. And they spend an inordinate amount of time managing those. And so I'd really like to kind of get both of your opinions on really where we are when it comes to database solutions, when we're talking about both open source and proprietary or quote unquote homegrown systems. What are some of the considerations that folks really need to keep in mind? And
I would say that, one of the places where open source really shines is when there's a well-established community of contributors to a project. So, I mean, if I set out to go raise money because I'm going to trounce Kubernetes, right? They'd say, you're a fool, right? There's 11,500 contributors to Kubernetes or something. It's an inordinate market weight out there,
right?
To go with. On the other hand, where proprietary can go is where they see a gap in the marketplace, and you can get some capital to put an offering into that gap. And in a lot of ways, both Datical and DB Maestro are raising awareness right now that there is a marketplace for these kind of tools, that there is a way that you can, employ some sort of automation tool to make your lives better. And there's been some good open source, precursors out there that have, that have brought in the idea of saying there needs to be discipline around this. I came from a Ruby on Rails background, so I've always been a fan of active record migrations and how that idea of a really disciplined serialized migration can change that thing. I remember, 10 years ago coming up to people and going, well, no, if you've got this version of the app, you just run this command and the database goes to that version. And they'd look at me like, you just came in from another planet. And so so there's a lot of good things out in the open source community, but there has to be that word community. There has to be that weight of mind share of people working on the problem in order to really move it forward. So anytime there is open source value out there, that is like Jenkins or something where you've got this product that's alive and moving and thoughtful in its construction, you'd be a fool to compete against it.
Right.
But where you see that community perhaps still coalescing or needing something to drive it, that's where I think a proprietary tool can really be a leader in the space.
All right, Robert, what are your thoughts?
Well, and now for the democratic response. Brady, you're wrong. You're wrong, Brady.
Oh wait, you're in Texas.
You're wrong. Look, we're big fans of our open source project, Liquibase. It started in 2006, and it was a really good tool. That's Nathan Voxlin was the founder. He's benevolent dictator for life for Liquibase, and he's identical. So he's our architect. And so he saw what was available with Ruby on Rails and was a Java developer, was kind of bummed out that it wasn't available for his stack. And so that's why he came out with Liquibase. And so, when we were starting Datical, well after that, we realized that there was something that needed more. Certainly, the rules engine, the ability to forecast change, actually break a build in development when you don't include those storage options or something like that. But for some companies, they have more time than money. Great. All right. That's what it's there for. But you have to understand that if you are on the other side, you have more money than time. Time to market is very important for you. And, like companies like Nike, you want to focus on your core competencies. That's when reaching out to commercial providers really helps out. Certainly proprietary in the sense that I'm going to do a homegrown solution built on open source. You have to realize that you are spending money. All right. You are going to take cash and hire people and pay for cloud services and computers and all this stuff. You are going to pay regardless. And the question you need to ask as a tech leader in your company is this the right place to invest resources? Do we invest on something that solves a problem where there are vendors out there that can fix it all up for us? Or are we going to give up on providing more functionality for our users and then worry about making our lives easier? I think it's pretty clear. If you are a smaller shop, and maybe you're an independent software vendor, ISV, something like that, hey man, Liquibase is great, okay? But you are having, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. You can either spend, 5% of that on implementing this open source tool so that it works for you, or you can rely on somebody else to do it. And that's the question. It's about deployment of resources. I think commercial, open source, have that debate. But you sure as hell should not be doing a homegrown solution. You should not be rolling your own database release automation solution, your own application release automation. Don't build yourself an artifact repository. They are out there. Don't build, your own cloud. We saw what Zynga did several years ago. They tried to build their version of AWS, and they missed out on the whole mobile gaming boom because of that. But somebody else is going to make that call again. I guess they didn't get the Zynga case study in business school. And so they're going to make the mistake again. It's all right. And they'll go the way of Sears. It'll be cool.
All right. All right, great. Well, you know what? We are about 15 minutes to the top of the hour. I want to give us plenty of time for questions because I got to tell you, we've gotten some really great ones in. But before we do, I just want to, hopefully we can have a quick discussion on really where database DevOps kind of fits into the whole process. So, yeah, is it something that can be inserted into existing DevOps and the tool chains and processes, or is it something maybe that has to run parallel to other tool chains? Or, you know, I'm still trying to figure the whole thing out. So hopefully you guys can kind of shed some light on that particular subject for me.
I think that you know, it's one of those things. You have to be humble if you're selling database tools, right? And because
I didn't get that memo. I'm sorry.
I wasn't going to say anything, but go ahead.
Okay, so I failed on but what happens is that, you know, you've got, the business cares that the application gets deployed. They know there's pieces of the application, and the database is just one of them. And so you have to take your place in line, and you have to be integrated with the overall release plan in order to be successful. So the goal here is that when we've done everything right, it's utterly transparent. It's just one line in the release plan that the database gets updated, and it gets updated correctly every time. And then we've been successful. But to say it has to be separate, it has to be out there, I think you're setting yourself up, because you're saying I'm special and we get all the special. And as Rob said before, we've kind of made that mistake with database before, is to say it's special and it has to sit somewhere outside of this. It's not. Yeah. It's just a part that the application takes to run. And so we have to make sure that if a database tool is going to work well, it has to be able to be folded very quickly into a larger application release. Or people are going to say, this is inconvenient, I'm not going to deal with that.
Awesome.
You know, and so it's valuable from that standpoint to make sure that the tool itself is essentially self-contained in the life cycle that happens within it. Because if you have to do too many touch points in the release process, then what happens is it's like, well, we got to call out here to do that preliminary, then we got to call out here to do that. And that's very difficult to set up in an orchestration flow. What you want to be able to say is, you know, oh, database expert thing, do the database thing. Thanks, all done, cool. Now we're moving on.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's, you know, when you go into somebody's house, it's just rude to start rearranging the furniture. You gotta play well with others. You know, regardless of my opinion that you should do the database alongside the application. A lot of folks don't do that. Okay, that's all right. And so you got to play with their existing pipeline. So I think, you know, companies, for right or wrong, good or bad, they've made a decision on some kind of bit of automation here. They've made a decision on a specific artifact repository. You know, they've made other decisions, and you must play along with that. So if there's an expectation that, for example, you're using, you know, Sonatype or JFrog for the artifact repository, that's where you got to put your stuff. That's it. You know, certainly with source code control, those sorts of things. And so where does it fit? There is some beginnings of DevOps at every company, and the tooling has to fit alongside it. You cannot go, you know, it's real hard to swim upstream. So you got to go with the current. And I think that it's imperative that companies that are trying to expand their DevOps tent and include the DBAs or security or networking or something like that, allow them to either bring their tools in or offer them suggestions of ones that will work with what they have today.
All right, great. So let's see, we're just about to the well, we have 10 minutes or so to the top of the hour. So I'm just going to go ahead and move us right into the questions part, because like I said, we've gotten so many great questions and I want to make sure that we get to as many as possible. So I'm going to throw the first one out at you guys. And let's see, the first one is, this is more of a philosophical question, more than a technical question. What do you say to folks who are embedded in the workflow doing manual steps in otherwise what could be a more automated deployment? They are afraid of being laid off since they are owners of these manual processes.
Yeah. Look, there's two things to that. One is they will be more important to the company, more valuable with automation, because that frees them up to do other things. There's also a really tight job market right now. It is much easier for companies to retrain, redeploy technical resources, especially technical resources, than it is to go and find somebody else. Is it easier to take a DBA and turn them into a database reliability engineer, a site reliability engineer, or to go and hire a new SRE? Training. That's the one that they're going to go for. And so helping them understand that. Management needs to provide a path forward. Needs to say, look, this is something you spend 80% of your time on. This is going away. So now you're going to go work on this cool stuff. And we're going to teach you Python. And you're going to learn how to interact with APIs. And you're going to be able to put a DevOps engineer or whatever on LinkedIn. This is a good thing. So you have to paint a picture of, instead of everything's changing, we're using this tool, to, hey, we're using this tool, congratulations, you get to do more stuff and be more valuable. And if you play your cards right, probably going to get a raise. That's something that management needs, the conversation they need to have, because losing people or having people that are upset and mad in the workforce, it's not a winning proposition.
Okay.
Right. I think that insecurity, I've seen it in workplaces before, when people feel like they're going to be automated out of a job. And one of the more compounding factors is where, these tasks might have been outsourced to a third party or an offshore firm to manage the database change or something like that. And now they're looking at their contract and how that fits in, and what this type of move to automation might mean for their contract. So the company has to be aware of what a nervous worker is going to be like, and how they're going to approach one of these problems. If it's going to be a defensive strategy, it's difficult to sort of say, yeah, but look, you'll be able to retrain and everything will be great. That most people are going to not be happy on that front.
Right.
But I think that the queue of items that people have in their pile right now is so vast in most companies. Nobody's ever going to say, oh, I'm all finished, everything's done, And so I think it's just
never
really
ends.
Right.
It's short-sighted thinking. And so normally I just say, look at all the things you decided not to do last week because you had to do these manual tasks. Free license to do that. So I think it's a comfort thing. You want to help people feel comfortable, but it's a factor. You got to weigh it in.
Yeah. Okay. Great. I agree 100%. We keep hearing about automation, killing jobs, and I think it's going to do the opposite. But that's another conversation for another time.
These DBAs are not auto part factory line workers in Ohio. I mean, these are trained, highly sought after individuals. They'll be fine.
Yeah. No. I think everybody will be fine. But like I said, another conversation for another time. Next question, moving along. Database changes often require lengthy backup and recovery procedures to enable survival of changes that go sideways. Automation does not equal speed when databases need full backups and or full restores to recover from failed change implementations. Go.
What? What? Wrong. Wrong, wrong, wrong. Look, I got to tell you, the old way of thinking, I have to back up the database in case something goes wrong. Gosh, if only there was a way, Brady, that we could make certain that our changes, make sure our changes were done the same way correctly over and over again, from dev to test to production. And oh gosh, if only there was a way that we could, I don't know, get like a virtual database copy, maybe use something like Delphix that we can test against production-like data to see if this stuff is going to blow up. I mean, look, this person asking this question is absolutely right. With the tools available to this person today, that's life. And management is doing them a disservice. They are sending them to war with a slingshot, and that's not a winning proposition. So what I would argue is ask why. They're the Toyota 5 whys. Whenever something goes wrong, you keep asking why, and eventually get to the root cause. And I guarantee you at this person's company that they probably have a single dev instance or a single QA instance, and they have to deal with who's changing what, where, and when, and let's not do this. And in reality, if they had, adopted data ops and they had virtualized databases based on production data masked, things would be cool. And then you could roll out changes to that in an automated fashion. Things get a lot easier. But if your company is not investigating these new technologies, there's a problem. And I think that's the issue there. It is dealing with older technology that is based on the backup, and it takes too long. So we need to come up with a better way.
And on top of that, there are sets of practices in terms of database and application development and design that can be baked into a policy tool or a rules engine that would filter out or at least highlight scripts that would be potentially destructive to data, because there's a whole host of database changes you can do that are no risk. And so this blanket approach to say we have to back up every time is you're not discriminating the types of work that you're doing on your database and right sizing the safety steps you take.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of stuff DBAs are doing to make sure they don't break anything with somebody's script, and to being able to just, hey man, is that foreign key that I'm adding, or all the columns have an index applied? Just stuff like that that's just rudimentary. That needs to happen. That needs to happen way early in dev, and that's what DevOps teaches us. So there's a lot of this kind of dated thinking with databases that just it needs to go away, because the tools available have caught up.
All right, great. We're 2 minutes to the top of the hour, so unfortunately we do have to close out the Q&A section. If we didn't get to your question, and I'm quite sure that we didn't because we had so many of them, please know that the folks on this webcast will be getting a copy of all the questions, and I'm sure they or somebody from their organization will be happy to follow up with you offline. Okay, before we close things out, I do want to do the drawing for the $350 Amazon gift card. So without further ado, our first winner is Hema Devasetti, and I apologize if I mispronounce your name, but congratulations, Hema. Our second winner is Anil Bilapati. Congratulations, Anil. And our last winner for today is Michael Nit. Congratulations, Michael. And thank you all for joining and being a part of today's webinar. Do want to remind the audience real quick that today's webinar has been recorded, so if you missed any or all of it, you will be able to access it on demand. It's also going to be living on the devops.com website, so you can always go check it out there. Just go to devops.com/webinars, click on the upcoming section, on demand, because we've already done it. And it should be right there waiting for you. And then while you're there, just go ahead and if you've got a second or so, take a look at the other webinars that we have both upcoming and on demand. And hopefully there'll be one or two that pique your interest. Robert Reeves, Brady Bird, thank you both for joining me today. I really do appreciate the conversation. Had a great time talking with you both, and I know the audience got a lot out of it as well. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Charlene.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Great. Well, and I want to thank the audience also for joining me today. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm signing off. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye-bye now.